Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming.
Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to another Signpost Series webinar. I hope you're all keeping well and looking forward to another very interesting presentation. The Signpost Programme is a Teagasc-led initiative aimed at guiding Irish farmers towards sustainable practices. It focuses on reducing agricultural emissions, improving water quality and enhancing biodiversity. Through collaboration with industry partners and a network of demonstration farms, it promotes climate-smart farming and supports the transition to sustainable systems. And we're delighted to be joined this morning by the head of the Signpost Programme, Dr. Tom O'Dwyer, for an update. Tom, good morning to you.
Good morning, Cathal.
We're also joined by Teagasc Signpost Programme Training Development Specialist, Mark Plunkett, who will help me out with questions this morning. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Cathal.
Tom, just coming back to you. You've had a busy week. I think you had a launch of the Signpost Report 2025 during the week. How did you get on?
That's right, Cathal. So on Wednesday of this week, we launched a report for 2025, and that's what I'm going to talk about on this morning's webinar. And we had a workshop with our program partners. We have just over 60 program partners from across the Irish agri-food industry. Yeah, it was they received our results positively. So yes, we're making progress. But equally, they reminded us that there's much more to do, and I suppose they challenged us on, how we're scaling out the messages from our signpost farms and the experience of our signpost farmers out to all farmers to ensure that more farmers take on the good practices which we're demonstrating on our signpost farms. That was one of the challenges they put to us. So yeah, but look, the report was well received.
Yeah, look, from visiting a good number of signpost farms over the last couple of years, we can see huge progress even from an advisor point of view. So that's very positive. So yeah, I suppose the next step is rolling that information out, and that's a task in itself, I suppose, because it's a change for farmers.
Yeah, but look, Teagasc has the Signpost Advisory Programme. We have the and at the ASAP Advisory Programme as well. So look, we have plenty of advisory supports that are available to farmers to engage with, and yeah, we're happy to talk as well, I guess, with partner organisations to collaborate in delivering advisory messages. So yeah, there's in my view there are plenty of supports available for farmers, yeah, the more farmers engage with the service, the better. So the title of my presentation this morning is Greenhouse Gas Emissions on Signpost Farms and Actions Taken to Reduce Them. So look, I'll start by just acknowledging the efforts and the work put in by a wide number of people. I wouldn't be able to make this presentation this morning without the help of numerous Teagasc colleagues, program partners, the Signpost program partners, and also the demonstration farmers themselves. So I want to acknowledge all the help provided by those individuals, and I'm not going to attempt to name individuals, but look, I want to acknowledge the effort put in by everybody involved in the delivery of the Signpost programme and the publication of the Signpost report. Look, just maybe before looking at the results themselves, maybe to take a step back and look at what we set out to achieve in the Signpost programme back in 2021. And this is a slide I pulled from a presentation made in March 2022. And it sets out the objectives for the Signpost programme. And our objectives were then and still are to lead and support the transition of Irish farming towards more sustainable farming systems, to contribute to agricultural sector efforts to reduce agricultural emissions in line with national policy objectives. And this next point I find interesting because, as I said, I copied this slide from a presentation in 2022, and now we all accept that the target for reducing agricultural emissions is a 25% reduction by 2030. But even as recently as March 2022, there was still uncertainty over what the target for the reduction in agricultural greenhouse gas emissions would be. There was talk of some reduction between 22 and 30% by 2030. And it was only later that summer that the reduction of 25% was agreed, because prior to that, there was discussion in the media and obviously amongst policymakers and interested, farmers and farm organizations and so on. Some people were saying agriculture needed to have a bigger reduction target. More were saying it needed to have a lower reduction target. So that was only decided as recently as the summer of 2022. So our target is to reduce emissions by 25% by 2030. We also have to reduce ammonia emissions, and that's by 5% below the 2005 level by 2030. We also identified as an objective, and Cathal mentioned this in his introduction as well, that we want to ensure that there are no unintended consequences of our activities. So in other words, that by helping farmers to reduce greenhouse gas and ammonia emissions, that we have a negative impact on either water quality or biodiversity. So we have to look after all three environmental elements. We also have an objective of promoting farming practices and systems which improve profit margins. So we want to ensure that the actions that we're recommending to farmers can either improve productivity or improve profitability, and at worst maintain productivity and profitability. We set out to build national capability and capacity to provide advice to farmers and to develop the capability and capacity of farmers as well. And also we want to be recognized as a trusted knowledge source and broker. So there were our objectives. On the right-hand side, Darren, in terms of what impacts did we expect the program to have? We expected the program would have an impact on national greenhouse gas emissions, and we'd also expect it to have an impact on reducing the carbon footprint of meat and milk products and tillage products produced by Irish farmers. So we're trying to achieve both to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in total, so absolute emissions, and one of the ways of achieving that is by reducing the carbon footprint. And then in terms of our key performance indicators, how would we know that we're on our way to having that level of impact? And we identified a number of practice adoption targets related back to our marginal abatement cost curve, and things like reducing fertilizer nitrogen use, increasing the usage of protected urea, improving the percentage of soils at agronomic optimum, increasing clover content, reducing the age at finishing. And look, the list is longer than that. I've just included 5 on this slide. We had indicators in relation to tillage, like the proportion of land under cover crops, and the amount of straw incorporated on an annual basis and things like that. So we have a number of practice adoption targets, because ultimately the impact on greenhouse gas emissions will be as a result of the adoption of practices by farmers. So then in terms of and then we also had 3 pillars to the program. We had our demonstration farms, we had our signpost advisory program, and we also had some on-farm research in relation to soil and above ground carbon. In terms of what we have achieved, so we selected and worked with 120 demonstration farmers over the duration of the program, so over the last 4 years. We created a farm sustainability plan for each of those farms in collaboration with the farmer himself or herself. We then created and generated an annual sustainability report for each of the signpost farmers. So we provided measurements to the farmers on their progress over the course of the program to date. We have observed an increase in the usage of some of our MAC climate mitigation measures on these farms. We also have sampled the signpost farms, 91 of them to date, with a further 10 to be completed. And we've taken deep soil samples down to 60 centimeters to measure soil carbon. I'll talk about that a little later. We've also surveyed using drones and LiDAR technology. We've surveyed 92 of the farms to estimate above ground biomass and also above ground carbon. We've created biodiversity maps for 92 of the farms also. We've taken over 5,000 agronomic soil samples. They're the normal soil samples to 10 centimeters. We've analyzed those samples for soil pH, lime requirement, phosphorus and potassium levels. And on the back of that, we've also taken a a significant number of slurry samples, and on the back of those analysis and the results generated, we've created nutrient management plans for each of the farms, and those plans have guided fertilizer and manure and slurry usage on the farms. We've also launched a Signpost Advisory Programme. It was launched approximately 2 years ago now. A number of our farmers have been involved in AgNav user testing. So AgNav was not available when the Signpost Advisory Programme was launched 4 years ago. We've delivered extensive communications and training, including 260 on-farm events on our Signpost demonstration farms. And what sort of impact has the programme had? So I've identified 5. So first off, we've demonstrated that the climate mitigation technologies that are recommended by Teagasc, they match up well with production and efficiency. So in other words, the adoption of the practices has not had a negative impact on production and efficiency. We've also seen, as I said already, significant progress in the adoption of MAC measures. We've established a comprehensive baseline on soil and hedgerow carbon, and we've also established a significant data set for greenhouse gas emissions calculations. So we now have data gathered from our Signpost farms for 4 years. So that's a significant data set, and we can look at getting value from that data now in terms of interpretation and analysis. We also have significantly enhanced our national advisory capability, and the program itself is recognized at a national and international level. And this point was made by our Teagasc director, Frank O'Mara, at the event during the week, Cathal, at the launch of the Signpost report. And he talked about how he, as a member of the Climate Change Advisory Council, when the conversation comes around to, what is agriculture doing, the fact that he can talk about the activities of the Signpost Programme, and amongst other activities, but he mentioned the Signpost Programme. He said the fact that he can talk about that is well received by the Climate Change Advisory Council because it's evidence that the entire agricultural industry is working together to try and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So before getting into the results themselves, then, this is my final slide before getting into the results. One of the first things that we did in the Signpost Programme was we had the marginal abatement cost curve, the Teagasc MAC. And we decided that, we needed to put this in a format that would be a little more accessible to farmers. And we needed to identify the measures that were appropriate for the different types of farmers. So the dairy farmers and the sheep farmers and the tillage farmers and the beef farmers. So we created our 12 steps documents. And we have 12 steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for 5 different farming categories. And in fact, there's a 6th one as well. There's also 12 steps for equine farmers. So those involved in horse rearing and horse production. So so we have our series of 12 steps that farmers can take to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So getting on then to the results from our demonstration farms, and firstly starting with dairy. So these graphics are available in our Signpost report, which is available on our website. So I'll just highlight a couple. What we've seen on our dairy Signpost farms, we've seen an increase in soil fertility. 70% of soils are now at optimum soil fertility, as opposed to 55% back in 21. About 1/3 of the swards on our Signpost dairy farms are grass clover swards. Fertilizer nitrogen use declined from 2021 to 2022 and into 2023, but there was a rebound in 2024. Protected urea usage went from 43% in 2021 to 76% in 2022. Grass grown remained okay. There was a small decline from the highest level in 2021. But, it averaged between 12 and 12.5 tons of dry matter grown, which, look, there's scope for improvement, but they're the figures we measured, and concentrate usage increased. So I think there needs to be a focus on grass grown on these farms over the next number of years. but otherwise, apart from that, the numbers look quite good in my view. In terms of emissions on these farms, we see an increase in total emissions. There was more livestock units, including more dairy cows on these farms in 2024 than there was in 2021. So total emissions did increase. There was also more hectares farmed, so emissions per hectare actually declined slightly. And then the carbon footprint, the emissions per kilo of fat and protein corrected milk, averaged 0.9 of a kilo of carbon dioxide equivalent per kilo of fat and protein corrected milk over the 4 years. And the nitrogen balance declined in 22 and 23 down to 153, which is very close to the target of 150, I think, Cathal. But it did rebound in 24. We saw increased fertilizer usage, as I already mentioned, and also increased concentrate usage, accompanied by a slightly lower milk output in 24. So the nitrogen balance for that year was back up to 2021 levels. And if I try to explain the emissions per hectare figure, the trend here, it did decline. So why did it decline? And I break down the emissions into 5 different categories. So we can see that there was a slight reduction in enteric fermentation per hectare. Manure management was unchanged. There was a larger reduction in emissions from agricultural soils. So that's our nitrous oxide from our application of fertilizers. So that's the largest decline. We saw a slight increase in urea application. Again, shouldn't be surprised by that because there is more urea being used on these farms, albeit it's in protected format. And we did see a slight increase in emissions from liming. Again, maybe not to be unexpected. These farmers applied more lime in 24 than they did in 21. And as you apply lime, you get a release of carbon dioxide in the year of application. So this is a good thing, the fact that liming is up. And it's also, I think, very positive that, as a result of farmers' activities, we're seeing a reduction in the emissions from agricultural soils. And overall, on a per hectare basis, our emissions per hectare are down by 0.22 of a ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. We move on to suckler beef and we present the results in much the same fashion. We see an increase in the percentage or proportion of soils with agronomic optimum, so up to 50% of soils with the correct pH, P and K levels. 68% of heifers on these farms calved at 22 to 26 months, so possibly scope for improvements in that in the future. Fertilizer nitrogen declined. Protected urea usage increased to stand at 58% in 2024. The age at finishing is a big performance indicator for beef farms. And this group of suckler farms and particularly the beef animals on these farms were finished for bulls at 16 months, steers at just under 23 months, and heifers at just over 24 months in 2024. And the days at grass on these farms averaging about 220, 225 days over the 4 years. Again, an area perhaps that is an area for improvement perhaps in future years. And looking at the emissions on these farms, emissions in total declined by 1%. But again, there were more livestock on these farms in the last year, 24, than there was in the first year, 21. Emissions per hectare did decline, and the decline was greater than the decline in total emissions because there are more hectares being farmed by this group of farmers on average. The emissions carbon footprint per kilo of live weight beef declined on these farms and on average stood at about 11.4 over the 4 years. And the nitrogen balance again declined but rebounded in 2024. And again, trying to explain why the emissions per hectare declined. In this case, we actually saw a slight increase in the emissions from enteric fermentation and manure management, but we saw a bigger decrease in emissions per hectare for agricultural soils, a small increase in urea application. And this group of farmers actually, they had spread a lot of lime in 21, so they spread less lime in 24. So that accounted for a reduction in emissions per hectare between the 2 years. On average, over the 4 years, the farmers spread, I think, 0.5 of a ton of lime per hectare per year. So I think they spread a good level of lime over the 4 years. So I wouldn't be concerned about the level of lime they spread, or indeed any drop off in 2024. On average, over the 4 years, they spread a good level of lime. But just when you take the 2 years and look at the difference between the 2 years, it does account for some of the difference in emissions per hectare. And you can see that on average over the 4 years, the emissions per hectare declined by 0.36. And on the dairy calf to beef, then our optimum percentage of samples at optimum were 50%. We had 60% of the slurry spread in the spring. Nitrogen fertilizer declined over to 22 and 23, but then rebounded in 24. Protected urea made up 69% of the nitrogen in 24. The age at finish is again included here on this slide. Bulls at 20 and a half months, so steers at 24 months and heifers at 21 months. These are dairy beef animals rather than suckler beef animals. Days at grass, again, 220 to 230 days on average at grass over the 4 years. And again, the emissions here on these farms increased slightly in total. The emissions per hectare, it's a mixed trend, went down and have gone up a bit. And the carbon footprint about 7.63 on average over the 4 years, which is lower than the figure for the suckler beef farms. And I guess that's because there isn't a suckler cow to carry. So the emissions per kilo of beef, 7.6. And again, trying to explain the per hectare figures and the difference between 21 and 24, we saw an increase in emissions from enteric fermentation. Again, there were more animals on these farms in 24 than there were in 21. A slight increase in manure management, reduction in agricultural soils. So this is where the Signpost Programme paid most of its attention. So reduced fertilizer nitrogen, switch to protected urea, a slight increase in urea application, an increase in liming, and overall a slight increase per hectare of 0.28. I don't have any results for sheep farmers. We have a number of Signpost sheep farms. However, there was a change in the farmers involved. So some farmers started the program and some farmers left the program. So we didn't have a large number of farmers that were in the program over the 4 years. So, and then from that small number of farms, there was a mixture of lowland and hill sheep farms. So we didn't think it was appropriate to present the results on average. So we have included some results in the report for sheep farms. On tillage farms, then, we have 10 tillage farms participating in the Signpost Programme. On average, 57% of the soils are at agronomic optimum. 9 out of 10 or 90% of the farms are using organic manures. 16% of the area farmed was participated or took incorporated straw in 22 and 23. This dropped back slightly in 24 to 9%. But if you remember back to this time last year, the Minister for Agriculture introduced a concession to allow farmers who had previously applied for straw incorporation to bale the straw instead. So that was a concession last year, but it was at 16% in previous years. Chemical nitrogen was lower in 24, but again, there was a reason for that. There was a low acreage of winter cereals in the 23-24 season. If people remember back, the autumn of 23 was very unfavorable weather conditions for the planting of winter cereals. So then there was a lot more spring cereals which have a lower nitrogen amount applied. And then between 22 and 26% of the area farmed was planted out to cover crops. Again, that's a very good figure. And 16% of the area was sown to legumes. Again, a 1 in 5 years or 1 in 6 years for legumes in the rotation is probably about right. So 16% is a good figure. And 6 out of 10 of the tillage farms have forestry, and it's a key part of their farming operations. And then a recent development is the launch of the AgNav for tillage farmers. This was launched at the recent Crops and Technology Open Day. And this is just a screenshot from AgNav, and it presents the emissions data for 6 different tillage crops on one of our Signpost tillage farms. And just to point out that we have 6 crops, as I said, but you'll see that 2 of the crops, the winter beans crop and the spring malting barley crop, have higher emissions than the other 4, and there's an obvious reason for that. It's down to this limey green color here on screen, and that's representing the application of lime to the fields in which these crops were grown. So it's picking up on lime applied in the year in question. And also on the spring malting barley, you can see this blue part of the bar is higher as well, and that's reflecting higher fertilizer nitrogen use on the crop. So that's now available for tillage farmers. So moving on then to on-farm measurements, analysis and demonstrations. So I've mentioned this already. We've taken over 5,000 soil samples from our Signpost demonstration farmers, and we have seen an improvement in soil fertility on these farms between 21 and 24. We've also measured above ground biomass on our Signpost farms, and we've estimated, or my colleague Stuart Green has estimated, that hedgerows which are allowed grow up and out, like at this side of this image, contain more carbon than this well-managed hedge, which is at the bottom part of this image. So the hedgerow that has been allowed grow up and out contains 4 times more carbon than the hedge that has been and continues to be well managed. The second thing that we've established is that on average on our Signpost demonstration farms, Signpost demonstration farms, we have less habitats than would be for the typical average farm. So our Signpost demonstration farms, their habitat scores are the blue bars in this chart, and all farms nationally are represented by this red distribution of bars here. So on a scale of 0 to 7, you have a distribution of farms nationally, with the average at about 5.5, 3.5, should I say, this bar here, whereas the blue bars are stacked more to the left. So they on average, they tend to have a lower score. So it suggests that there's some work to be done on biodiversity on our Signpost farms on average. In terms of soil carbon, this work was led by Julia Bondi in Teagasc, Johnstown Castle, and she worked with colleagues in Johnstown Castle to first of all identify sites on each of our Signpost farms that they wish to sample, so sites of interest, and then they sampled those farms. So up to the end of last year, there was 67 farms with 268 fields, and there was over 1,600 composite samples taken, and they've been analysed. And so far this year, a further 24 farms, 92 fields, and 380 samples have been taken, and there's 10 remaining farms. And what we found is that there is a good level of soil carbon under our Irish soils, on average between 90 and 100 tons of carbon per hectare on our dairy, beef, sheep and tillage farms. The tillage farms on average have similar levels of carbon to our livestock farms. That's what the image on the screen is suggesting. And we have soils, our soils have been sampled, which have been shown to contain up to 200 tons of carbon per hectare. Now, they're obviously some of our more clayey soils and some of our peaty soils. So this is a very useful data set, and it's information that we didn't have previously. So we have a good baseline now established for both above ground and below ground carbon. We also worked with colleagues in Teagasc Moor Park to deliver a small demonstration project in the winter of 23-24, whereby 18 dairy farmers fed the Bovaer feed additive through their diet feeders to their dairy cows on farm. There was no negative issue, no significant negative issues reported. And that was just I suppose, a look-see demonstration, and the farmers were willing to do it. But they also gave us feedback that if they had to pay for the additive, they wouldn't be doing it. So yeah, from that point of view, I guess it was informative. And we also worked with colleagues in the National Biodiversity Data Centre to conduct pollinator scores on 14 of our farms, and the results of that are included in our report. The Signpost Advisory Programme, so we've launched that 2 years ago. To date, it has engaged with 18,000 farmers, and there's over 14,500 plans completed. So these are tailored individual plans for farmers, indicating actions that would be suitable for the farm in question. So we're taking the experience of working with the demonstration farms out to a lot more farmers. And indeed, on that point, we're happy to work with our program partners, whether they be milk processors or meat processors. We're happy to work with partners to deliver those advisory consultations in partnership, and to deliver those plans to more Irish farmers. This slide just summarizes a range of communication and engagement activities that we have undertaken, including training activities. So, we have delivered there's a lot of farm walks delivered, a lot of media articles, a lot of short videos, and look, people can look at that afterwards. So I believe we have been quite active in communicating around the Signpost Programme and the practices that we'd like farmers to consider and to take on, so as to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the picture then on the bottom right, that's a picture from the inaugural Teagasc FBD Environmental Sustainability Awards, and featuring the winners, John and Maria and Brendan Walsh. And this initiative was launched last year, and we think it was very successful in highlighting sustainable farming practices. So it's a key part of our program now. The program has also hosted a number of significant visitors over the last 4 years. EU commissioners, ministers for agriculture. There's a French minister for agriculture there as well somewhere. And in the top right, we also hosted Prince Charles, as he was then, but now King Charles III of England, on the Signpost demonstration farm in Waterford of Shane Fitzgerald. So look, the program is recognized nationally and internationally, and I suppose that's borne out by the fact that we get requests to host various visits. I'm coming near the end, Cathal. So we did also measure the knowledge, skills and mindset of our Signpost farmers. And what these results show is that the Signpost farmers, through their involvement in the program, have increased their knowledge and their skills, and have also changed their mindset around climate change and climate action. And the final point I want to make, we have also evaluated our demonstration events. And off this slide, I'll just mention that 85% of people surveyed as they were leaving a demonstration event in 2024 said that they would recommend such an event to other farmers. And the bottom right-hand side speech bubble, they were also asked to rate their self-reported learning both before and after the event, and the score increased. So they self-reported that they had increased their knowledge through learning at the event. So I think that's very positive. And following on from that, then the people who completed the survey at the event, we also asked if we could follow up with an interview 3 months later, and we followed up with 48 farmers. And 3/4 of them had implemented a climate action since attending the demonstration event. So I think this sort of work, this research work, which was conducted by Caoimhe Duggan, working with Siobhan Kavanagh, I think this is very important because it highlights the importance of demonstration events, and it highlights that as a result of demonstration events that farmers take action. As I said at the outset, the Signpost report was published earlier this week, and it's available on our website. And in summary, there's a lot done, but there's more to do, to borrow an election campaign slogan from the early 2000s. And I would say let's build on what we have achieved. And my final slide then, I want to finish by acknowledging our program partners, all our Teagasc colleagues, our first partners, but also then all our external partners, the various meat and milk processors. Then we have a range of some input suppliers as well. Then we have a number of government and state agencies and program sponsors. And we also have a lot of support from the farm organizations and industry representative bodies. So look, for all our partners, I'd like to acknowledge your support and look forward to working with you again into the future. So Cathal, thanks very much.
That was brilliant. Thanks a million, Tom. And actually, I'm delighted you finished on the slide at the end with all the partners, because as we're finding from every side environment at the moment, the more people that's involved in the industry to help out, the better the impact is. So that's really important. Tom, there's another slide you finished on there. I just want to maybe just ask you a question on it. You showed the surveys, and for me, you presented a lot of work, and we've seen a lot of work Signpost done over the last couple of years. And sometimes at the very end, when we have to disseminate the information, that's where we all fall down. So I'm delighted to see you're asking the farmers the questions. How can we, I suppose, impact them to create more change and behavioural change and change management and all that. So you've started that with the survey, and is there plans to dig into that social science element more, I suppose, to help farmers take on these new technologies and initiatives? Because I suppose farmers are looking at us, and there's a lot to take on. There's huge benefit, but someone still has to implement it on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an area that we do want to pay more attention to. I can't say we have definite plans at the moment, but it is, on our to-do list. And we did manage to, I suppose, put a plan in place and then secure a master's student to do the work. So I guess that's the way it works typically within Teagasc. If there's a question to be answered, a research question, you make a proposal and you seek funding and hopefully then get a student to work with you to do the work. So yeah, look, it's an area we want to look at, and we'd love to work with I suppose researchers who are already working in that area, because we don't have that expertise within our own team. So we need to partner with social science researchers, either within our own organization or indeed external to Teagasc. We'd be happy to talk to people.
Yeah. Just to remind everybody to, if you have any questions, stick them into the Q&A tab, and Mark will help you out with those in a second. And one other thing, I suppose, that jumped to mind, Tom, when you're showing me the slides, I just want to clarify a little bit. So the use of lime, which we see as a very positive thing, but it is correlating with an increase of emissions. Maybe can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so let's start by re-emphasizing the fact that the application of lime to productive farmland is a good thing. Okay, and so we're not recommending to apply lime to low input grasslands. So low input grasslands are managed differently, but all other grasslands and all tillage land then after that, the application of lime is a good thing. So that should be the starting point. That said, lime is calcium carbonate, and once it's applied, it breaks down. And on breaking down, one of the things it releases is carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is one of our greenhouse gases. So in the year of application, lime releases carbon dioxide, which adds to our greenhouse gas calculation. So that's a negative in the year of application. But in following years, as the lime begins to have an effect, the farmer should be able to, and in our research would indicate that the farmer should reduce fertilizer nitrogen application, because more nitrogen is available in the soil. The application of lime has increased pH, has unlocked nitrogen in the soil. That's available to grow grass or grow a tillage crop. So the benefit comes in subsequent years then. And I suppose the other thing to add on that, if you have the habit of a farmer of spreading a load of lime every year, and then there'll be no difference between one year and the next. So it's included every year. The reason there was a difference in the slides I showed was because there was a higher level of lime applied in 21 and a lower level in 24, or vice versa. And that gives you the difference between the 2 years. But if it's consistently applied one year to the next, you won't pick it up in a trend. It won't affect the trend over time.
Yeah, no, I think that was important to mention. Yes, there's a little bit of pollution swapping, but it's the greater two evils. So one step back, two steps forward. So that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that, Mark. Plenty of questions coming in there.
Yeah, there's a number of questions coming in there. One of the first questions there, Tom, it's around nitrogen. Maybe talk to us around nitrogen usage, Tom. What's happened, I suppose, since 22, even up to the current year, and I suppose what are the drivers around nitrogen usage on Signpost Farms?
Yeah, so look, what's happening on the Signpost Farms is, as far as we can see from the data that we've gathered, is that farmers pulled back on nitrogen usage in 22 and pulled back again in 23, but that there was an increase in usage in 24. So, talking to colleagues in Teagasc, talking to the Signpost farmers, listening to the Signpost farmers, explain, their practices on farm. Okay, so I guess there was a reaction to the price of fertilizer in 22 and 23. We had the war in Ukraine. There was a spike in fertilizer prices. So there was a tendency across all farms, and this is picked up in national statistics, to use less fertilizer nitrogen. So that would be one thing. The second thing, I guess, as our program advisors, we're working with farmers to try and encourage them to improve soil fertility. We're encouraging them to apply lime. We're encouraging them to reseed with clover or multi-species swards, both red and white clover, actually. And as a result of all that advisory activity and the farmers taking on those messages, there were opportunities to reduce fertilizer nitrogen. So there was, farmers reduced fertilizer nitrogen because of actions they had taken. So they were the two things, I suppose, that were influencing the reduction in fertilizer nitrogen. And I guess then in 2024, you had a poor weather year. It was a challenging weather year for grass growth. Fertilizer nitrogen price also came back. So those two factors were at play. And I guess, their advice was provided that farmers needed to grow grass. And, if clover wasn't performing under the weather conditions that were there, farmers still needed to grow grass to feed animals. So, there was an increase in nitrogen. It was a decision taken by farmers. So I guess in some respects, Mark, maybe the job isn't complete on, clover, multi-species swards, grassland management, and so on. If we're to reliably reduce fertilizer nitrogen, and that the clover and the improved soil fertility is to reliably provide nitrogen to grow crops afterwards. So that's my interpretation.
And I suppose the other big one in there, Tom, is the switch then to, in terms of fertilizer type, that were spreading more protected urea than the nitrate based fertilizers, and there's been big progress made in that area as well. There's another question here, Tom, around how do the kilos of CO2 say for, in terms of live weight gain, what happened those during the period?
Yeah, so the carbon footprint for the carbon footprint for beef farms is calculated in total initially. So you get a total figure, then you can allocate that on a per hectare basis. So, if you have the total and you have the number of hectares farmed, you can do the calculation, that's per hectare. And then it can also be allocated on per kilo of live weight gain. So it's not per kilo of live weight on the farm, it's per kilo of live weight gained on the farm. So for people on the call who are familiar with the beef output report and ICBF, that beef live weight gain figure is calculated. So, it's the live weight. It's the live weight sold minus any live weight purchased with an adjustment for any inventory change. So the live weight on the farm at the beginning and end of the year. So that it's possible to calculate the live weight gained on the farm during the year. So you take your total emissions and you can allocate that over the live weight gained. So if I recall now, the slides aren't in front of me, but on the suckler beef farms, the emissions per kilo of live weight gained declined, whereas on the beef farm, on the dairy beef farms, it actually went up a little bit, I think now, Mark, is my recollection now.
Okay. There's another question here, Tom, that there's been great improvements in terms of soil fertility on the Signpost farms over the last number of years. Just have you any comments saying nationally, is there a lot of farms out there working at suboptimal soil fertility levels?
Yeah, so the latest analysis we have from Teagasc is that there's 24% of soils at agronomic optimum, which is pH greater than 6.2 and soil P index 3 or 4, soil K index 3 or 4. So about a quarter of the soil samples that come through Teagasc for analysis come back with the correct analysis. They're in the right combination of pH, P and K. So on the basis, I guess, of that high level figure, you'd say, yeah, there's a significant number of farms that need to pay more attention to soil pH, soil P and soil K levels. Perhaps, if we dig a little deeper, there's perhaps a proportion of those soil samples that are taken on low input grasslands or maybe from lowly stocked farms. So yeah, maybe it's not all out as bad as that, but it's still not going to be right. So I'm confident in saying that more farmers need to pay more attention to pH, P and K, soil pH, P and soil K. And I guess the other point I make, and I know, Mark, that you're big on this as well, and I've heard you yourself talk about it as well. It is concerning that there's a decline in the sales of fertilizer P and K. Yes, we have a lot of animal manures and animal slurries, and yes, we need to make better use of our animal manures and animal slurries and distribute them better across our farmed areas. But we still won't have enough, I think, to improve soil P and K. So we will need to purchase fertilizer P and K. So again, more farmers might need to pay more attention to the types of compounds and the mix of compounds that they're using to ensure that they have their soil nutrient balance right.
Yeah, I just come in behind you there, Tom. I think on the dairy side, only 25% of the soils are optimum. That means 75% are suboptimal. And I think it's key in terms of nitrogen use efficiency that, that we have, as many soils in the optimum range, especially on the dairy side where we are using more fertilizer. On the dry stock side, 65% of soils need lime. So I think that would be a priority on the dry stock side of the house. That would be my trump card, or the first thing I would go at on the dry stock side of the house. You grow more grass, you'll release, mineralize more nitrogen and also P and K. So yeah, I think we need to work a lot more on the nationally as regards the whole area of soil fertility and try to build soil fertility levels. There's another question there, Tom, coming in around the whole area of methane reducing additives, and how much will they reduce methane both while fed, say annually, and do you see them becoming widespread?
Yeah, so we have research. Teagasc has conducted research. Other scientists internationally and in Ireland have conducted research. So there's a growing body of evidence behind methane reducing feed additives and methane reducing slurry additives. So there's two types. Neither are widely available in Ireland currently. And also, I guess what's missing, Mark, is unlike what we're just after talking about, the liming and reduced fertilizer nitrogen, more clover, for those technologies, we can make a case that if you pay attention to liming, reducing fertilizer, nitrogen, clover, switching to protected urea, that it can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions and can also improve profitability. It can reduce your costs. If you reduce fertilizer, nitrogen, you can save money. So it's easier to convince a farmer, or you have a ready way of making a case to a farmer that this is the right thing to do. It helps the environment, it helps your pocket. On the feed additives, there is not yet what's called a business case for going to a farmer and saying, if you use a methane reducing feed additive or a methane reducing slurry additive, it'll help the environment. We can't say it'll help your pocket. It's actually going to hurt your pocket because there's a cost. So I guess until such time as there's either an incentive or something else, something to encourage. Maybe it'll be something to force farmers. It could be a regulation. It could be either a carrot or a stick. But until such time as there's a carrot or a stick to motivate farmers to use feed additives, I can't see it happening. The research is there. I'd be confident in recommending them. But as of now, I can't see them being used. I would hope, in the next 2 to 3 years on our Signpost demonstration farms that we will secure funding, or there'll be an incentive put in place so we can demonstrate them on our demonstration farms. That would be a key first step for me, Mark.
Tom, just based on what you just said, and we could see back a couple of years ago the impact of fertilizer prices and how that changed farmers' activities on the farm. So cost, and you mentioned it from the get-go, like profit margin is important, because if we don't have a profit, we don't have a business, then we don't have a farm. So maybe this is early days for you to answer this, but just looking for your opinion, the change in cap potentially could affect something like the additives for reducing additives in our food to reduce methane. Could that potentially be a problem if the money is not there, that some technologies just won't be adopted?
Yeah, for me, the technologies that have a cost for farmers with no benefit on the other side. So we can't say that use a methane reducing slurry additive, add nutrient value to your slurry, save money on fertilizer. We can't. That's not a proposal we can make. So consequently, if the farmer is to use a methane reducing slurry additive, they have to pay for it. Full stop. That's it. And the benefit is they reduce methane, which is good, and if farmers are that way inclined, that is great. But the majority of farmers, the profit motivation is strong, and they look at that and say, no, I can't justify that cost of 5 or 6 or 7,000 to add a methane reducing slurry additive for my herd of maybe 100 cows. So that's the type of figure we're talking about. So to go back to your question on the Common Agricultural Policy, my understanding is that other countries in Europe have and are currently using CAP funding to incentivize the use of methane reducing additives. Not altogether sure of the full details, but I have seen it listed as an action in a country's CAP program. And also I'm aware that it's certainly been considered in at least one EU country that in their next CAP program that they would seek to allocate funding to such an initiative. So yeah, governments, including the Irish government and the EU, are going to have to consider how they can incentivize farmers to take on these technologies which will reduce climate. And I guess they're going to have to consider how they can do that without raiding the existing budgets. That would be the best outcome, because I guess we don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. So so that's a very thorny issue, I guess, Cathal, and one for the policymakers. So.
Tom, there's another question there. I suppose that some of the big climate technologies are, say, clover and protected urea. I suppose how can we encourage farmers to adopt these, or do you have any maybe suggestions or solutions as to how do we get more farmers onto the road to take these technologies on?
Well, I suppose the first thing that comes into my head, Mark, is, seeing is believing. So, if we can highlight or showcase or demonstrate farmers and farms that are using clover, white clover, multi-species, red clover, and are using it effectively, and that the farmers themselves are willing to talk about it. And look, it comes to mind, I was on 2 of our Signpost farms recently. There was John Walsh down in County Tipperary. He's using white clover, red clover, and multi-species, and he talks very openly about the challenging journey that he has taken to switch from a dependence on fertilizer nitrogen to a reduced reliance on fertilizer nitrogen and increased usage of clover, multi-species, and red clover. He's quite open about it. He says it's not straightforward, but he's pleased with the progress he's made, and he's happy that he's made the switch. And then another of our Signpost farmers, Dermot Heaney up in Navan, County Meath, we had a group out on that farm recently as well. And again, over the last 3 to 4 years, Dermot has made huge strides in correcting soil fertility, in reducing or increasing white clover content. And both those farmers, interestingly, pay huge credit to our Teagasc colleague James Humphreys and the support that they've got from James and a group of farmers that he's working with. So, I think demonstration is key. I think we have to ensure that farmers who are in demonstration groups, or not, discussion groups, are supported to share their experiences and to support one another, so farmers can support one another. And we have to keep talking about it, Mark. We have to keep, putting it on the agenda at, open days, putting it on the agenda for meetings, talking about it in the media, talking about it on webinars like this. But our farmers have to talk to one another and support one another, because I guess, if we don't reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, the focus will come back onto agriculture, and the narrative will start in the media again that agriculture isn't doing enough, agriculture needs to do more, we need to cut the national herd, and so on and so forth. And the farmers who have taken the effort, have made the change, they'll be scratching their heads and saying, like, what's going on here? We've switched to protected urea, we've reduced nitrogen, we've increased clover, we've taken on the incentives for feed additives and so on. And now we're being focused on again. Why are we being focused on again? Well, I'd put the challenge out to those farmers. You need to convince more farmers. You need to share the message. You need to talk to other farmers and help them to take the first step like you did, so that's a key thing. And I guess we also, the other thing then that comes to mind, Mark, is you and I and Cathal, we all need to talk about the incentives that are available, the supports that are available. So, for example, Teagasc, has promoted the TAMS grant that's available for low emission slurry spreading. And, we have huge uptake of low emission slurry spreaders. Our advisors have promoted the measure for red clover silage, have promoted the measure for cover crops, and we get uptake of those measures. And I know Cahill's colleagues now are promoting the measures under the Farming for Water EIP. And there was a particular push put in on the measure in relation to cover crops earlier this year. And I see figures this week now, I think that there's 1,300 applications to grow cover crops, and the farmers are going to receive funding under the Farming for Water EIP. So yes, we need more incentives, but we also then need our advisors and advisors across the industry to promote the incentives and to ensure that the incentives are taken up by farmers. So sorry, I've given you a long answer there.
No, I think that was
some of the ideas.
It was a very apt way to finish, Tom, and a very positive way. And I think you're right. Let's focus on the positives and the good work being done, because there's no doubt there's a lot of massively good work being done across the country, and we're obviously looking at some of your slides. We're starting to see the impact of that, which is wonderful. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions today, but I'd just like to thank everybody for submitting their questions. And also, Tom, thank you. That was a really good presentation. Delighted to see the progress of the program, and wish you very best luck in the next number of years to keep growing and building on that. And and making sure we meet our 2030 targets. That's the key. And Mark, thanks a million for helping us out with questions. Always really, really brilliant as usual. And just want to thank Yvonne Marr in the background for helping the running of the webinar. She's the one behind it all, really keeps the show on the road. So thanks a million, Yvonne, in the background. And just for next week, just to remind yourselves, we have going to look at another presentation on the do's and don'ts of drainage in mineral soils, and we're going to be joined by Teagasc researchers, Professor Owen Fenton and Dr. Pat Toohey. That's a really interesting one as well next week, so not to be missed. Make sure you join again. So do tune again next Friday, 9:30, and slán go fóill.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.